I'm Greg Tatum on a very foggy Sunday morning, so be careful if you're driving out there. And sitting right next to the Reverend David Key, founding pastor of Lake Oconee Community Church, and of course the great Don Elliott is at the controls and giving us solid advice on God Talk, that show where we try to break Main Street with the road to Aramaeus, perhaps. But as I sometimes say, because later this morning we will be on 94.7, the Talk at Lake Oconee, doing sports on the weekends, sort of like also where God takes a look, or we look at game films with God for the past week about how faith intersects in our lives in this ever more complicated Good morning, David.
Hey, good morning, Greg. It is a foggy morning.
Yeah, you were saying, just for a little warning out to give us a little traffic.
People stay safe, yes, because it's just wet. It's foggy and wet.
And I think, well, anyhow, KJ Allen will have the weather forecast later, even in this hour. Good meteorologist and supporter of the show here. Interesting week. Before we hit the air, we were talking, it is the anniversary of that terrible day in on 9/11, that the World Trade Center and the bringing the plane down up in Pennsylvania. We will get into that, taking a look back all these years later. But this right now, even this morning, if you happen to be up and checking out the television before you came over here to listen to God Talk, you notice they're still talking about Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth died this week. What was your initial reaction?
Well, I think when you look at Queen Elizabeth's life, 70 years of service is a long time. I still have yet to live to be 70, so I still got 2 more years.
I wish I could
I'm
say
70.
that.
Yeah, but no, what a long life and a long life of service that she did as queen. Queen Elizabeth was my mother's age, and so my mother, they were both born in 1926, and I think they were part of that generation of women who were just ahead of the really strong feminist movement in this country that really did begin to question a lot of things about society. At least my mother, and I would argue Queen Elizabeth, were still very much comfortable in the traditional dynamics of life, and yet they were very strong women, highly educated, and willing to lead, even in a very traditional sense. And so I think Queen Elizabeth epitomized that generation, which is dying off. we'll all get to that age. That eventually it moves to the next generation, and so I think she just represents an era that is moving away from us, and again, goodness, she served up until Tuesday and died on Thursday, and I think if anything in older life, if we can serve a day or two before we die, that's a wonderful, wonderful life to have lived.
I think taking a look at also when you mentioned her parallels with your mother and other women of the time moving into their own, stepping out of the shadow of a male-dominated society. She also, despite being a royal, demonstrated, I think she was still a teenager during World War II, some character in at least seemingly being more than just symbolically supporting the people of Britain during such a difficult time. She, they had pictures of her driving trucks, which may have been photo ops, but I think in her mind, with the interviews you've seen and read over the years, legitimately her heart was in it.
Absolutely, and I think one of the first speeches I've heard of her was when she was 21, which would have been 1947. I think she was in South Africa. I forget where her location was. But a dynamic speech as still Princess of Wales, would that have been her title? That she just, and again, in relation to this particular radio show, God Talk, she really felt like it was a divine calling. And of course, they consider it a divine calling. When you look at the title of King Charles now, as it was for Queen Elizabeth, Defender of the Faith is one of the titles that they get. And so there is a strong religious connotation to the whole role in England and in their role as royalty in England. And so, it's kind of an interesting piece. I just think the feminine dynamic, when you add up Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria, which preceded her, out of a 200-year dominance, throne more than 100 years. And so it's an interesting piece when you think historically, because women had not served in that kind of leadership in the Western world, until that particular point. I mean, so I think it has influence on this country as well as any other country that has English influence.
And when she became 90 back in 2016, and Queen and the King she serves, and the book gave an overview of her, deeper motivations. She said she had put her trust in God to do her work rightly. In 2002, I draw strength from the message of hope in the Christian gospel.
Yeah, I think her willingness to articulate her Christian faith got stronger as she got older. I think you could literally look at the 70-year span, and see much her talking about God and her religion a lot more openly, especially in her Christian and Easter messages that she would do annually. You just saw her kind of articulating it stronger and stronger as she got older. I did not know until the movie about her. They've done several TV series and movies about her. I didn't realize her strong relationship to Billy Graham.
Right.
I didn't realize how enamored she was with Billy Graham when he would come to England. I knew he did crusades in London. I did not know her relationship with him. So she even intersected with Billy Graham in kind of the American evangelical piece. Now, I don't know that she would ever embrace saying that she was, similar as far as an evangelical is concerned, because I think she was very devoted to the Church of England. I think she's very much a devotee of what all the Anglican tradition represents. And so, but she was willing to engage people of other religious traditions.
I was just going to say, in the time that I would have to, not living, not being old enough to be cognizant of the time of that going on, but I would think in the eyes of many of the more, when I say conservative, I mean only age-old members of the Church of England and devout followers of the Church of England, that was probably pretty troubling.
Well, and I think probably a bigger issue, more so than Billy Graham. I'm not sure how public that interaction was. Again, I only saw it through the movies and never knew it until I saw it in the movies. So I don't think her interaction with Billy Graham was overly public. I think probably the bigger religious piece for Queen Elizabeth would be her interactions with Roman Catholics.
Right.
I think back 70 years, and
what was going on in Ireland.
And there was a definite discrimination and a looking down upon Roman Catholics within England. Of course, you know the history, the bloody history of the transition when Henry VIII left the Roman Catholic Church, and just even some of the civil wars that occurred in relation to Roman Catholicism and England. There was just a lot of built-up prejudice and discrimination that went on with that. And so for her to attend Catholic churches, which she did, including the cathedral, the Roman Catholic Cathedral there in England, she willingly embraced Roman Catholicism as an element of society. I would not say that she became Roman Catholic in any way, no, but she was willing to be seen publicly within Roman Catholic circles. She really engaged all the popes. She lived through like 5 different popes. Right. And so each of the popes, including Pope Francis just recently, she engaged with them on a regular basis. She reestablished diplomacy between England and the Vatican. And so I would say that was probably the biggest display of religious tolerance and of religious freedom and of a society that really should allow for that diversity. That was big for England. We may not see it as big here, but that was big for England for her to do that. And it's going to be interesting because King Charles, has had a history as Prince of Wales engaging the Islamic and Hindu traditions as far as engaging and welcoming the East Asian influence that is now in England, and probably is the more people are prejudicial against that element that is in England now. And Prince and King Charles has engaged that community in similar ways to what his mother did with Roman Catholicism. And so, and I think he has taken on the title, I may be wrong because this is all fairly new, the faiths, plural, F-A-T. So he is the, I forget what was. He's not the advocate of the faith, but anyway, he's taken the two titles. So he's still the traditional title that the king and queen have had, but they have added protector of the faiths. So they're acknowledging a kind of interfaith component in England with his rise to the monarchy, because it's a new day in England.
Right.
You know, I mean, the conservative government now has folks from various religious traditions, and so even the conservative government has a diversity of reflection within the cabinet and within their equivalent of the cabinet. Yeah, so I mean, England's facing a new day, and the king is kind of representing that as well.
We want to remind you that you can join the conversation. This is God Talk. Just give us a call at 706-453-4140. That's 706-453-4140. Before we take a break, I just saw this interesting headline from a publication, Jewish publication, that said the biblical significance of the rainbow and the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, one for Israel. And it says when crowds stood and wonder a huge double rainbow, and they go through citing scripture and how they some see that as a sign that rainbow. I don't know if you saw it on TV. There was a rainbow. Somewhat, well cast over the England.
Well, and that's when it's sad that our biblical literacy is so low at the moment, because even around Lake Oconee, whenever you see a rainbow, you should remember the biblical story of Noah and the assurance that God is with us, and that tragedies that are happening, the tragedy is not some sort of punishment from God, but instead, God's presence in the midst of it, and the Noahs of the world that help us move through those devastations are there by God, and God's present. And so every time we at Lake Oconee see rainbows, I hope we're always reminded that that's just a symbol of God's presence with us. And the Hebrew people know that, Jewish land knows that, those in England know that. And, I'm sorry when we forget those biblical stories, because they're important.
We will continue our conversation on this Sunday morning. You can call 706-453-4140. This is God Talk on the Talk and the Voice of Lake Oconee.